Today's an interesting conversation because we've gone through the shoulder, right? The shoulder, quote unquote, like the bones. What are we talking about when we say shoulder?
So you'd be talking about the clavicle, the scapula, the humerus.
Bingo, right? Those are the main bones, right? Some of the other structures that become important when people talk about shoulder damage, right, are going to be if someone says they have like a torn labrum, or they have a separated shoulder, or they have a dislocated shoulder. Well, what is that really inferring about the bones?
It would be more like muscle ligaments, so like rotator cuff.
What's the difference between rotator cuff and a ligament?
Rotator cuffs are muscles.
Yeah, a rotator cuff, right, is a complex of muscles that are going to attach at different parts of this humerus, right? And we're going to talk about that in the muscle part. What is a ligament? Why is it so important to this conversation? Like, what even is a ligament? If somebody says, well, I sprained my shoulder, or I sprained my AC joint, right? Or my acromioclavicular, I had a separated shoulder. If they dislocate this from this, what do you know surrounds? What do you know surrounds this sucker?
There's a bunch of ligaments.
There's a ligament, yeah. There's ligament that's going to pull this into here. There's ligaments that attach some of this stuff. There's ligaments that go in from here to here. There's ligaments that are going to help with how this is the AC joint, right? There's going to be ligaments that help connect all this stuff together. So are ligaments connecting muscle to bone, or are they connecting? What are they connecting? What are they doing?
They're helping keep bones where they're supposed to be.
Right, so they're going to keep bones in check. So a lot of people say that ligaments are bone to bone connections. Are these things just like dead material? Is it just like glue? Well, what are ligaments made out of?
Like just different types of tissues.
Right, so then the different types of tissues, like when you think of how these ligaments are grown out of themselves, right? So that it's another different type of material, because there's bone material, and now there's ligament material, and then there's all these hybrids of materials, because it's not just like there's a bone and then there's a ligament. It's like all these, if you looked at a microscope, you'd see all these different phases of a matrix of cells that kind of change into ligament. There you have bone, and you have hybrid cells in between. So, but they're made out of and called different things, right? And that's why on the document I have a whole bunch of just crazy ideas on here, because it's like, yeah, it's cool to know that this ligament is helping to connect bone to bone, but it's number one, it's important to know it's a completely different material of a hybrid matrix, right? Do ligaments have normally a huge blood supply?
No.
Yeah, they don't really have a big blood supply. And when we're going to go into, okay, it's nice to know about some of these ligaments. The names of them are, I don't know, they're really that important. You know, it's like, okay, you just know that you have these ligaments that help kind of check function or check motion, right? So it helps with checking the motion of some of these things. Well, what other things could ligaments also do besides checking motion? Like how would they check motion?
I feel like it's kind of almost the same as with muscles. Like one is going to lengthen to help let it move in the joint without it letting it come out of the joint, while one is shortening.
That can be like some of those fibers can crimp, right? So what's really interesting is there's a document inside this. It's stupid amazing. Number one, dense bands of collagen, connective tissue, span the joint, anchored to bone on each end because they become part of that bone, right? They're not like someone had put a pin in it. It's like they become the bone, right? I think like how tendons become part of the periosteum and then part of the bone, right? So, and periosteum means the bag of the bone, because there's like a bone bag of connective tissue. There's an interesting thing in the literature called epiligaments that are covering the surface of the ligament that supposedly helps it with its vascularity to help bring a blood supply to that ligament. What's also interesting is that it says at a microscopic level, ligaments are much more complex. Recent studies have indicated that normal ligament cells may communicate by means of prominent cytoplasmic extensions that extend for long distances and connect to cytoplasmic extensions from adjacent cells, forming an elaborate three-dimensional architecture. Gap junctions has also been detected and associated with these cells connections, raising the possibility of cell-to-cell communication and the potential to coordinate cellular and metabolic responses throughout the tissue. Do you know that the ligaments even have sensors?
I would think no.
Right, they have tons of sensors. It's crazy. So they have these things called Pacinian corpuscles. Some have Ruffini endings, free nerve endings, and some have like Golgi tendon-like organs in them. Each one has got a different feedback loop for a different purpose. And what's even crazier is if people have had pain, those reorganize. They don't stay the same. They change. And what is a sprain of a ligament? What is a strain versus a sprain, right? Here, I'll show you something. You stay right there.
Okay.
Think of this bag as kind of like as a ligament. This would be mechanical strain.
Okay.
This would be mechanical sprain. So what's interesting about a ligament is in some of these reports of biomechanically, ligaments are approximately 2/3 water, hydration, 1/3 solid, primarily collagen, different types of collagen. Another function relates to viscoelastic properties, which means they kind of have this kind of stretchy thing, but it's like if you ever saw a chicken ligament, they're not really that stretchy. They're more like this. They would call this stretch because it wouldn't really go anywhere, right? So it has, but then it has this other property called creep. So if you load it over time, it starts to deform. Literally can start to deform. So if the whole point is to check motion, and everyone's like, I want more range of motion, and then what they're doing is mechanically loading this, they could be permanently deforming this tissue. They could. And they're like, okay, if I have permanently deformed sensors, embedded sensors that are giving me information and feedback around here, and I'm driving a ton of force in here over time, I don't know if I want to be doing that to my tissue. I don't know. Yeah. Like it sounds kind of risky, especially if the way I drive force into it is at end ranges of motion where those tend to be some of the higher risk positions for injury. It'd be a lot different if I'm bringing a weight up into that motion and trying to hold it versus me putting all my weight and driving it to a position that maybe overall it's like, I don't know. That's my own bias too, based upon some of this data, right? Ligaments also creep, which is defined as deformation or elongation under a constant or cyclically repetitive load. Creep is particularly important when considering joint injury or reconstructive surgery, as excess creep could result in laxity of the joint, thus predisposing it to further injury. That was written in 1994. Okay, so in such joints as knee, proprioception is also part of the joint. So you're talking about muscle, joint, and cutaneous receptors. When ligaments are strained, they invoke neurological feedback signals that then activate muscular contraction, and this appears to play a role in joint position sense. So ligaments are also big in joint position sense. So if someone's like, man, I have this AC separation, or I sprained an ankle, or I sprained my MCL or my knee, I tore my, that's funny how they're like, I tore my ACL, but they don't say I sprained my ACL. It's a different degree of tear as the severity of the sprain. So how much did you tear? Complete tear? And I think there are degrees. They say ligaments are most often torn in traumatic joint injuries that can result in either partial or complete ligament discontinuities. Due to difficulty in studying partial disruptions, most of discussion here will be focused on complete disruptions, mostly studied in rabbit models, so not even human models, right? Say like a ligament MCL, which heals by the process of 3 phases: hemorrhage with inflammation, matrix and cellular proliferation, and finally remodeling and maturation. Now here's the crazy part. So then what happens is scar tissue is initially quite disorganized with more defects, more blood vessels and fat cells, more inflammatory cells, and loose connective tissue. After a few weeks of healing, the collagen becomes quite well aligned with the long axis of the ligament. The third phase of ligament healing, there are defects in the scar becoming filled throughout the matrix and becomes more ligament-like with time, with some major differences in composition, architecture, and function. If somebody has a tear, a sprain, will it ever be the same?
No.
Probably never. And someone's like, well, don't worry, I tore it a long time ago. That's all better now. It could be permanently changed, more likely permanently changed, because the vascularity is down, and if it is healed, it's replaced with an inferior type of tissue. It could be okay, but the chances are it's not. And now you're talking about a material now that people are like, well, I've been stretching it, and if there's a certain amount of creep in here, and they have poor muscle coordination, because these guys here are trying to coordinate the movement along with the tendons, along with the ligaments, along with the feedback loops, along with eye information and all this other type of stuff that's giving you feedback of your environment to make an action. Whoa. Right now you have less information, feedback loop stuff to depend on, and your brain's like, I don't know if I feel comfortable going from here to here now. I don't know if I do that, right? Because it's like part of this information may be gone. And that's why the body view is so important. It's because, like, what do we think these ligaments are made out of? How do we think they respond to deformations and forces? Because there are people that are like, well, stretching's good, stretching, like, it's not about good or bad. It's about, what do you think this stuff is made out of? How do you think it responds to the forces in the environment, and how do you think you can control them as a living system? Right? That's it. It's not good or bad. It's like, well, how do you think this is happening? So, and just because this sucker's got a whole bunch of stuff in it doesn't mean it's like the most important stuff, or doesn't matter. Right? It's like, it's a part of this view of what this stuff is constructed on. And if I'm going to start moving this stuff, and I know that, okay, this guy had a separated shoulder or has dislocated something, there might be disruptions to some of these ligament continuums. And if there's a disruption to the ligament continuums, you know that it's a part of feedback loops into muscular control. In some literature, it talks about the muscle position and the amount of tension that the ligament would have, because supposedly there are some smooth muscle cells in some ligaments that have been discovered. I think Schlepp discovered them with the Fascial Congress back in like the early 2000s, something like that. So, which it doesn't really mean that the ligaments can really contract. They just kind of change their shape a little bit, right? And what's frozen shoulder? Like, or adhesive capsulitis. They talk about the changes in ligament properties. There's times where, in some of the literature, where ligaments may ossify. Whoa, turn to bone. Yikes, that's attached to the ligament. It's like, man, that might have been disrupted, right? So that's exactly why this ligament stuff is important, is because, yeah, it's great, know all the names of the ligaments if you want, right? I don't know if that's as important as saying, okay, you've had some damage to the ligament. What happened? Like, what's happening now? How are they controlling it? What do they see? Like, what are they sensing? How does it feel? Like, what kind of output does it have? And how do we get this thing? How do we start training this thing? And because the whole point of this is to empower people, which was this, right? So we had that, and you can barely see it because this one sucks. Hoo-yah! Not really. That sucks.
I feel like you might need to buy some new markers.
Well, you know, when I last bought these markers, when I used to do this a lot for people, and then I got too busy, and look at that. That's awful. That's just plain awful. I think I may need to buy some new markers. Oh. Close enough. Materials control and
Sensation.
and sensation or perception. So that perception thing, because sensation would be like, I think of it as below conscious level. You're getting all this sensation. There are sensors that are delivering information to your non-conscious mind. When you can perceive it is when it reaches a specific threshold and your conscious mind's like, oh, this is important, right? Or your non-conscious mind is like, pay attention now, time to pay attention, right? So if I have materials that are not giving feedback, then it may affect this sensation thing, which then can affect the control thing, right? They're just so interrelated. And, when the idea of this whole ligament thing relates to two major pieces of this puzzle, which is, you ever hear of allostasis? Well, what is allostasis?
I actually read about it, but
So what like in general,
isn't it like the load kind of thing, like what your body can handle?
someone who walks in and they're on meds, and all this stuff happened to them, they don't work out, they don't even ride a bike, they don't go walking, they kind of sit down, is their allostatic load coming in, right, is probably going to be pretty high because they've had like a whole bunch of trauma, to their system, and they're deconditioned and whatnot. The excursion away from, like, how big of an excursion can this person make when they're like, oh yeah, I work out, I've done that. Okay, I do some form of walking or cardiovascular work. I've done that before. Okay, all right. I'm used to this kind of workload, but I have this thing in my hip. Oh, okay. Well, how many injuries do you have? Okay, not that many injuries, pain in the hip, only one real injury. It's kind of like that thing. Okay, and the pain was in the shoulder. I only feel it when I drive. Cool. So you're starting to fit the context in towards how would the perception of what happened, and they're like, how many things have been damaged, and then when we're looking at control, it's like, well, we're just testing control of what? Position, control of torque, like how did it feel while they did the control, is that okay? And then overall, this middle part is like that agency, like how are they doing pretty good coming in, or are they not really doing well, right? And then where that level is they call that homeostasis. Honestly, exercise is like a stressor. It's a poison. That's why they call it a hormetic response, or hormesis. It's like, you ever watch, and I love movies, right? Princess Bride. You ever see The Princess Bride?
Long time ago.
Long time
yes.
ago. Do you remember, like, there was the Men in Black, and he's playing a game to the death with a Sicilian, and he puts poison in both, and he gives, like, he's playing a game of wits, and he's got the cup, right? They both drink the cup. Guy dies. The Man in Black's fine. Why? He'd been drinking poison for years, just slowly increasing his tolerance to it. That's exercise. Exercise is increasing your tolerance so your body gets a chance to build material and control so that it feels okay with the next time it does it. And ligaments are a part of that, right? So ligaments are connecting bone to bone. They're full of these different sensors that tend to change. So if somebody has an arthritic joint, sensors may not be the same in that joint, right? So it's okay, all right. But then as it changed, if it changed going one way, does it change going the other way? Maybe. I mean, I'd find it hard to believe that it only goes towards disorganization all the time, even though it's part of, the second law of thermodynamics? Like everything goes from
so. That
first
sounds right.
is energy cannot be created or destroyed, and then energy goes from an organized state to a disorganized state, something like that, right? And we're not going to live forever, but the whole idea of plasticity would be like how things maybe change and have some level of permanence, right? So like facilitation, potentiation, and long-term potentiation, and then eventually plasticity, where maybe it's now organized instead of just being excited to do something. Now the cells are actually building materials to then handle that long term, because it's like, wow, this energy is worth it because now I can do this thing And what sets it all in motion? This is the craziest part. What sets somebody actually want to build materials in a direction?
Gotta come from them. Like they just have to want it.
Bingo. Fundamental objective. That's the fundamental objective. If there is no objective, not just like this is my goal, it almost feels like life or death. If you don't do this thing, you don't feel alive. If that's not flushed out right from the beginning, that is so important. That professional connection of how important really is this? Because like if it's just like, oh, I'm fine with not feeling my hand when it goes numb all the time. Yeah. Like if that's just normal life, it may have something to do with the ligament, not knowing that it is a piece of the puzzle. That's it. So what are some things about ligaments that you have questions on, or that you've been looking at?
It's making like the quote unquote muscle memory.
Just call it memory.
Being in gymnastics when I was a child, it takes me very little time as an adult to get into the splits. I don't practice, I don't stretch, I don't do anything like that. But it's something that my ligaments were probably stretched to that point where they're never going to
when you were in
tighten back up. When
you were in gymnastics, did it take you a long time to be able to get in the splits, or was it something you pretty much inherently had?
Just like sitting into like the one leg forward and the one leg back, that was really easy. Could never do a middle split with one leg out to each side. And then that's when you sit up against the wall, they come up behind you and they press you into the wall further with their feet and they walk away, and then you just scooch away because you're in a lot of pain.
Well, where's your major problem right now?
In the hips.
In the hips, going which direction? Out to the side. So it may have long-term repercussions from people pushing you further than where the joint maybe can go. And that's that creep phenomena, right? So it's like if there's laxity from long-term deformations in these joints, which I don't know I don't have MRI eyes. And it's like I have no idea. All I can think of is that there is research and data that shows talks about this idea of creep and talks about laxity. And I mean, shoulder in itself, we talked about how muscle control and timing is a big deal because again, this is where it's connecting. It's just floating there.
Yeah.
It's just floating there. And this is this side, sorry. This right here has got the little disc and it sits on top of the sternum, nubrium, right? So it's like, it's not like that's really anchored in there super well. It doesn't look like it's really that sturdy. It's pretty crazy. And if you ever see the skeleton where this is like connected into it, it's like they don't even really know how to attach it. They kind of just put a bolt in it with some wire. You're like, how is that on there? Yeah. Right. So it's pretty amazing, especially when you see a cadaver, how tissue envelops around it and how it loads, and it's crazy. And when we start getting to the muscular side of things, I used to think that like rotator cuff stuff wasn't, those muscles probably aren't that big. Some of those muscles on different people look so different in different sizes, depending upon like what were they doing with it. Because again, this stuff adapts with use. It completely adapts with use. And that's why that allostatic load idea and having a way to say like, okay, I'm going to start here and I'm only going to do a couple things because this person has been through the ringer, right? And then another person's like, man, they've been training for a long time. Let's go and let's find stuff and let's start training, because the whole point of this again is to get to exercise. Everything is about exercising. It's not about a raised floor. It's about how quickly can I get to the point where we make these excursions away from normal, because it's like you want that sandbox. You want to find, okay, where's that person's sandbox? And okay, well, how can I make these excursions in all these different parts of the sandbox? Whether it's like this side is tension and this side's endurance and this is like position and this is like multi-joint movements. It's like, oh, what do they got? And then how does it, like the cardiovascular component, how does that fit into there? That whole entire stimulation piece, and how they recover from it. This is all about getting into training, because like the ligaments for one part may be different from one person to the next person, and also joint by joint depending upon how they're using stuff. That's big. So as we start to talk about other joints, and we start to talk about things that may have happened to people, it's like, okay, like what are some things that we're looking at in specific cases? That's going to come up then.
Yeah.
Because now we know overall, it's all set in the frame of what I'm thinking about all the time. It's like this is always, that's why it's like I'll review people's mobility profile. I'll see like what do they have coming in, like what is their agency today, like what is their mental state at, and then from there it's like, okay, these are the things that were all damaged previously. How's the control going for what I've last looked at, and then can I make any more excursions to see if that allostatic load, if it's changed, so I can add a little bit more poison into the system to see if they're now completely immune to it. I want them to be more immune to excursions away from normal. That's exactly what we're looking for, over and over and over again, and it's all just set. Today it was just set in the frame of, okay, here's another piece of material. Here are ligaments, bone-to-bone connection. I think a majority, I think some other people may have different definitions, and that's okay. It's the idea then that they're grown, materials are grown out of each other, and the ligaments don't have a really good blood supply. They can be deformed or torn, and when they recover, or if they even recover, they're a shell of what they used to be.
I think it also just makes more sense to like once, like the one time I wrecked my shoulder and then it healed, and then it's easier to get it to be in the same state that it was when it got hurt the first time.
Right.
Like it was just moving something so easily at work, thought I was doing it right, and then all of a sudden I was just like, oh, cool, it hurts again.
Right.
Can't get it out past here.
Yeah, and so it's like there's the ligament part of it, and it's like, okay, so there's a ligament part to it. Has there been any damage to the cartilage? Has there been any damage, like the material side of things, right? And that's not even talking about like how they're organizing, because what did the article say? The cells are talking. They're talking. There's information going from cell to cell, and how many cells are there?
An asinine amount.
It's crazy, right? And thinking that somebody knows where something's coming from. I'm like, come on now.
No.
That I have no idea where stuff is coming from. All I can do is think of how it's controlled, and then how they're reacting to it as it's happening. And I can have my theories. That's okay. But like to think that I will know out of all the permutations that can happen, that's assuming that everything that they have going on is diagnosed too. What if there's something that's undiagnosed? It has nothing to do with the ligament, nothing to do with their shoulder. What if there was like, no, I had one person got this back pain, really bad back pain. Okay, well, how bad is it, right? Question, right? Thanks for telling me. How bad is it? It's an 11 out of 10. I'm like, what are you doing here? Go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Stage 4 lung cancer.
Oh.
Am I going to exercise her back pain away? I mean, if it's above a 7, go seek medical attention. There are steps for this stuff, right? Because like, you don't know, like I don't know in how many different times where people have had undiagnosed stuff. I mean, if you care about people and you care about their progress, that could be a possibility. How would you know? You do your best with your intake, your info, put together your mobility profile, and if stuff really doesn't make sense and their pain keeps going up, you should probably see a doctor, right? If that was like, that's like a 5, well, that's still pretty high. It's pretty crazy. Or they're walking in kind of sideways like this, like, you maybe want to maybe get some pictures, right? Because just because there are pictures doesn't mean that they have to have orthopedic surgery. It's just like, what's going on with the materials, because it'd be really nice to know if they have like end plate fractures, they got something going on with their shoulder, they got maybe some disc disease and herniations in their neck, whatever it is, right? So you know, because that's going to change how I load this stuff. Because again, how they control it may have stuff to do with the materials and may have stuff to do how they're organizing information together, which is more of like that software issue.
Yeah.
Because their system may be like, I'm just missing a feedback loop somewhere out of how this whole movement is orchestrated, and for some reason I don't feel safe going there, so pain response here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Could be ligaments. So again, sprain usually means tear. Strain usually means some sort of like light deformation. Usually you need something to confirm that, like an MRI, because it's soft tissue.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like, okay, or maybe ultrasound. I think it depends on what they use to diagnose it. But like, we can't diagnose anything in the exercise field, so it doesn't really matter. You're using the medical system for info. And that's why radiology reports are amazing. When people are like, here's my x-rays, they're like, great, where's the radiology report? Because that's what they do. I'm going to use a professional's info on how they're reading this thing, because I don't read this stuff for a living. They do.
Yeah.
So it's like non-diagnosed. I'm gonna say, oh, this is I'm going to build up my control. Here's how I'm going to challenge this. I'm respectful of their allostatic load, and because I know what could be permanently changed and how the control may be altered.
I feel like it's making more sense now, but also it's still just blowing my mind every time I find out more.
Yeah, even when I do research to prepare for this, there are things I'm like, oh, whoa, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Like even thinking about now, like how everything is so interconnected, even like with ligaments, muscles, all that stuff, like breaking the sternum and then not having any pain in the clavicle, like even with constantly moving this and having a super active job, the only thing that hurt was my rib cage because of the expanding and
Yeah. So it's
compressing
like,
the
do you think
breathing.
that the expansion, the contraction of the rib cage would alter shoulder position?
Yes, because you're going to become a shallow breather if you're in a lot of pain, and then you're going to start elevating.
Are any of the shoulder muscles attached to the rib cage?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just like if you were to inhale and do something and exhale and do something, would those things be at different positions? You're damn right it would. So now it's like the challenges of an inhalation thing and an exhalation thing. What aids inhalation and exhalation? That's the kinematic synergy stuff. So if I were to inhale, like? That's kind of, I almost want to lift up. I
Yeah.
almost want to flex because I'm going through extension when I inhale. Usually when I exhale, I kind of do this slouch thing. So it's almost like flexion, extension. But then I could also, this would open up. This would contract even further. So I can go in all these different directions and get my shoulders along for the ride.
Yeah.
And usually when I rotate left, my right wants to protract and my left wants to retract. And some people rotate to the left, that's all they do. They don't even torso rotate. They just do this. So then when we start going into motions and kinematic synergies, that's what we're going to be talking about specifically, like what's happening when we see this. We went through basic motions, right?
Yeah.
Now we're going to see like how do these motions work together, and then next week are muscles.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about muscles, what makes up a muscle tendon skeletal unit, and then what happens if they're injured, how does that relate to ligaments and bone, and then from there it's like how's this stuff grown, how's it managed, right? How does a muscle know to do something with another muscle and have timing? So there's some cool theories out there, but it's also really nice to know some of these basic ideas that people have studied before. And again, all this stuff is information that is completely free on PubMed. Like you go to pubmed.com, you can type in whatever you want to search, and there's free books, free articles from like the past, I don't know, from like the 1930s. Right? All, and you can type in, click on the filter that says free, open source, is like free text, and it'll populate all the stuff that's free. If you want to see the stuff that's also behind a paywall, you get the abstract of it, but you won't get the whole study. You have to pay for it. So, which is interesting because some of those ones you have to pay for are through government funding. So you get to pay for them twice.
Yay. Love that.
So, cool. Any big questions? Any big takeaways besides what you just said?
Not really.
Cool.
The mind is just opening up more about how wild the body is.
Yeah, that's why I love this. Yeah, I love talking about this stuff and experiencing it again and again, because to me it really is miraculous that we just don't fall apart.
No.
You know, we just persist. Some things are super fragile, and other things are just so resilient. You know, and it just can evolve and change. When I thought everything was already studied and figured out when I was in my 20s, I just figured out how much it piggybacks off of ideas that may not be super concrete. You know, it's like, okay, then have a healthy skepticism. And getting hungry, huh? So, healthy skepticism, figuring out what the base ideas of, to have ways to build upon a foundation of processes rather than protocols. And then lastly, what are some things that just don't normally change in how humans operate and how our physical environment operates? It's like there are some laws of physics that really, I mean, they're changed at the quantum level, but like if we're dealing with forces and torques and moment arms and stuff and levers, it's like it'd be really nice to know about that stuff to set up some of these future challenges. And we're going to get into that too. So, because like if we want to be able to figure out these challenges, someone's like, well, I just used 5 pounds, but they're throwing it all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second. What do you think a weight is? Do you think weight and mass are the same thing? They are not the same thing. Not even close, right? So, and we'll cover a lot of those ideas too.
Sweet.
Cool.